Hello, crafty friends. My name is Jessica, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we have a card using a couple of the items from Simon Says Stamptember release from 2024. Now, we're going to be doing some ink pad watercoloring. We're going to be using some stamps and some dies, as well as this cover plaid plate from Simon. And I have a special twist with that, so make sure you stay to the end to see how I use that die. Now, I did go ahead and pull some of my Canson extra large watercolor. I had to trim it a little bit to ensure that it fit here in the original Misty. This is one of my go-to watercolors. I like this one and the Tim Holtz watercolor, but I chose this one just because it was the one that was out. I had recently used it and decided to just move forward. Now we're going to go ahead and heat emboss these images with embossing powder. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because it allows to create little wells for your watercoloring. And this is a really easy way to contain your watercolor. I highly recommend it for newbies and those advanced users because it just allows a little bit of freedom when you're placing that color down for it to stay where you want it to. So in order to do that, I do want a black image. So I'm using VersaFine Clair because it stays wetter longer. It does have a little bit of a pigment base to it as opposed to a dye ink, which would dry really quickly. And so I'm using that and then immediately sprinkling it with clear embossing powder. This is Simon Says Stamp Clear Embossing Powder, and we're just going to go ahead and tap it off, and then I will heat set it off camera after cleaning up. I always like to clean my embossing powder up right away because if not, I always end up spilling it. So we're going to do a quick clean and then go ahead and set this Misty aside with the stamps in it. I'm going to go ahead and leave them in there for now just so that I can move on to the rest of the card. So I am using the Tim Holtz silicone mat here from the glass mat, but first we have to do this peel and reveal on this new Simon Says Stamp grip mat. I am one of those people that will leave the protective cover on for as long as possible, but I thought I was going to end up using the grip mat and then realized it was not what I should have grabbed for. So we are going to pivot because my paper is not sticking, and I realized that was silly to use that because it's not meant to grab your paper like that. But this is what I should have used all of long. And this is what you should use when you're watercoloring because it can keep your paper flat and actually keep it sticking. So we just go ahead and we're squishing a few colors down here on the silicone mat. This is great for using with inks and watercolors because the water, or not the water, the ink, and I guess the water here as I'm adding it, beads up on the surface, doesn't sink in, and so you have an opportunity to play with the colors before they dry. If you used something porous, you're going to lose that ink into that porous surface. So for this, I'm keeping the coloring really easy. For the leaves specifically, I'm using Cabbage and Artichoke. These are two colors that are out of a trio. And I'm just starting with Cabbage and then going back in with Artichoke to add a little bit of a shadow layer. And then here, now that all of the parts of the leaves are dry, I'm just adding a little bit of dotting to the leaves just for a little added texture, playfulness. Now for the rest of these florals, I'm using one color. So I'm going in light with the first base, kind of doing a couple florals, letting it dry. Here I went in a little heavy with the water for these two, and so they are a little bit more wet when I come back with my additional colors. But I'm keeping it really simple. So I'm going back to the original floral that I first laid color down, and I'm going in with a little less water. What's really fun about these dye inks is you can go in with very saturated ink, or you could go in with some water and build the color up, which is what I'm doing here. I'm only using one color to create all of the shadowing and the depth. Now this color in particular, and I haven't tried the other two, but Galaxy has a lot of pink to it. And so a little bit that I noticed when it was drying back in some spots, it was drying back with some pink, which I really liked. I thought that was really fun. But I'm just using the one color, like I said, adding water at the very beginning for a really light wash, and then just using more and more of that saturated ink from the pad to create that little bit of shading. Now here I struggled a little bit. I knew I wanted to color the berries red, but I kept trying to color the stamens, I think is what they're called, from the purple florals, and I did not want those to be red. So I messed up a little bit and colored some of them red, but we're gonna try to fix that. I'm gonna add a little bit of this white gel pen over the top to try to create a little bit more of a white palette. And then I will go in with the color that I ended up painting them later on. I'm gonna let it dry. Just adding a little bit of the terracotta. I was going for a very fall feel with these colors, so that's why I grabbed a lot of the regal colors here in this line, which is a galaxy, terracotta. Those are all very regal in my opinion. I end up adding, I believe, honey, just a lot of more of those more muted kind of tones for this card. Terracotta is also one of the most beautiful oranges in the Positively Saturated line. I reach for it often. I love the way that it's pairing here with that galaxy. So while it definitely has those springy floral vibes, I tried to bring it back down with some fall coloring. Now, remember I talked about earlier using clear embossing powder to create little wells. So that's why I chose this form of watercoloring. Here you can see I made a little bit of a smudge with my hand, so I tried to fix it there and it ended up fixing it. It was kind of hard to see to begin with, but I could definitely see it in person. And also, while I was coloring this, I realized I forgot some of the leaves, so we're just going to quickly put those back in. But back to the wells, using embossing powder is really great to create those little wells like I talked about and controlling your color. Now, you can get a little bit of carried away and still get color outside. It doesn't keep your color in completely, especially when you're using a lot of water. It can seep out. But for the most part, if you're careful, you can create really fun watercolors and have a little bit of a boundary. Think of it as the rails up on your bowling alley. You or those guards. They put them up so that your ball always goes towards the end and doesn't end up going into the gutter. And so it just creates a little bit of a handicap for those who need it and for those that are also very well versed in watering color. It offers a nice little safeguard so that you're not spending all of your time making sure that you're being precise and careful. So we're going to go ahead and do a quick clean. I use all things squeaky clean from Brutus Monroe when cleaning all of my mats. So for this one, I did use squeaky clean and then also some water just to make sure that I got all of that color off. And then I use squeaky clean on my grip mats, my sticky mats, my surface, everything. I use it. Now we're going to go ahead and use some die cuts to cut these out. If you do not have a small pair of nippers in your craft room and you're using these die cuts that are all together like this, I highly recommend it. You can twist all of these off for the most part. There are a couple that I think would be really challenging. The ones that are located inside of dies, you're going to see those here in a minute. They put them inside dies to help alleviate some of the spacing. So, like this one had one of the florals inside of that smaller floral cluster, and those can be a little hard to like wiggle out. So, I recommend getting a pair of nippers. It makes it so much easier just to go ahead and use those, and you don't get hurt. I've been injured by dies before. Highly recommend just getting the proper tools. You can find them on Amazon, and there are a couple companies that make them. Mine are for my husband's toolbox. Shh, don't tell him. I don't think he's missing them. I've had them for a couple years now. So I went ahead and die cut those out, and now we're gonna build our background. So I went ahead and took this cover plate and I cut it out of 110 cardstock. I do use the opaque accent from Amazon. It's a lot cheaper than Nina 110 pound, but it's very comparable. And I actually reach for this more often than Nina because it is more white, even though the Nina is like classic crest, solar white, whatever. This one is brighter. So I have been using this a lot in my craft room. I have it linked below. It is not an affiliate link because I do not have an affiliate link with Amazon, but I highly recommend it. It's a lot cheaper and a lot easier on the pocketbooks. I guess I said that twice, but it is. So I'm just gluing these together. I'm going to go ahead and glue 3 together and then keep one out. Now, this die is also not identical through both sides. So you need to make sure that you line them up the right way, because if you do it backwards, it is not correct. As you can see down there at the bottom, there is just little triangles, and then up at the top, they're slightly bigger. So you can create a really fun look by flipping it 90 degrees, 180, 180. But it's going to give you a little bit different look if you do that. But I wanted it to be all the same. Then I went ahead and took a die that cuts out these little strips from Simon Says Stamp and cut them out of clear silver cardstock glitter. And then I went ahead and I'm weaving them in and out. Now, this is going to seem a little counterproductive or maybe a little over the top, because I'm going to end up covering it with that spare topper over there. I'm going to go ahead and weave these in and out and then put that white die cut on top. You could have just glued the strips down and got the same kind of effect. You'll see, I think, in the final picture at the end that having the weaved look does give it a little bit more of a dimension. So here you can see I'm going to put that other die cut on top. That's kind of briefly how I'm going to lay it out. I liked the way that it looked by having that cardstock kind of weaved in and out and like lower, and it just gave a little bit more depth to the final product. I think if we had just glued these on and then put the white one on top, it still would have been just as beautiful and not as time consuming. I have sped this up to 500% faster than what I did in real life. This took most of my video. I had a movie playing and I just went to town putting these in and out. And I'll be honest, I think it took me about a half an hour to get these all wiggled in the way that they were supposed to. But I think it's worth it in the end. It's not necessary, but it added a nice little special touch. Now, a few tips. Once I got these all in the way that I wanted, I did add a little bit of glue and put some pressure on them. But I wished I would have cut them before adding that final layer to the top. I had a hard time trimming them back far enough that they didn't show in the end product. So I think once you have them all weaved in and out and you're going to add that top layer on, be sure to trim it back, because you can trim them shorter than the outside border and that will help hide them. I trimmed them all at the end, and you're going to see I struggle with trying to get them because this is thick cardstock. It is 110 pound, and I am layering four of them together. Three of them are here that we're using as the base. Then we're adding that glitter cardstock, so that does add another layer of thicker paper, and then finishing it with another pass of that 110. So it was pretty dense, and so I was just struggling trying to trim all of those silver pieces off at the end. So now I'm getting, make sure you line it up. Like I said, they are not the same 180 degrees from one another. And I'm just looking at it and loving it. It looks absolutely great. Like I said, weaving it was not necessary. If you're looking to crank this card out, you should have did it not this way, because this is definitely not it. So I guess I did end up trimming them, but I didn't trim them far enough. So some of the ones that are peeking out here still are the ones that I'm going to struggle with. So I added a little bit of glue underneath them. I'm adding some more glue on top. I'm still using this thicker nozzle from the Barely Arts glue. I had this on there for my daughter from a previous time, but I did find that it's not clogging when I put a needle in it. So I've left it. I've not transitioned back to the fine tip needle. So now we're just using a lot of pressure because there's a lot going on here, and I want to make sure that we're getting it adhered the best way that we can. So adding pressure, even adding more pressure here by pushing down on these blocks to really get these paper layers to adhere together. I'll take this time to let you know that I have all of the links listed below in my description box, so be sure to expand that for the supplies used today. Now, please note that these are affiliate links, and what that means that if you click on a link and shop with me, I do receive a small commission at no cost to you. This just helps keep my craft room exciting and products available for these videos, as well as just a special thanks to let me know that you like my content. So now I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to let that panel dry over there. And we're going to go ahead and work on the sentiment. I really love the fonts of both of the big U's in this set. And I decided to use the one that was a little bit more bolder. The other one's really thin and petite, but both of those U's in the stamp set have dies. And so that's really great. The rest of the sentiments are very, I don't know, linear, I guess, in the fact that I can use my paper trimmer to trim them and make them really straight that way. If you also have Simon Says Stamp has sentiment strip rectangle dies, those work great too. And I'm sure there's one that matches these that would work really well. I able to eyeball these kind of straight lines on my small trimmer, so I just used that method. So I went ahead and to match the watercoloring, we used the same black ink and clear embossing powder just to finalize how these look. And then we're going to go ahead and die cut the U out. Like I said, there's the thinner U and the thicker U, and I have not used them yet. So cutting dies can be really exciting because they're new. You know, I'm one of those people, like I said, that I like taking the plastic off of things and or leaving them on there until I absolutely have to. Really more is probably accurate. But I do enjoy that first initial peel. So that's stuck a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and get that cleaned up. But first I'm going to go ahead and trim these off. And this is where I'm struggling a little bit right here. These ones I'm having a hard time cutting them close to the edges, and so it's leaving a little bit of that glitter cardstock on the sides, and I'm just struggling with making sure that I cut them out. So I wished I would have cut those to begin with to hide them a little bit better. But it ends up kind of working out. You know, handmade cards, I think that I say this every video, they're meant to be not perfect because it just shows that somebody made them and not a machine. So I'm trimming down my card base because I saw it was a little bit on the thicker side. I hand cut all of my card bases, and sometimes that means they're not perfect. So I just use my little side guillotine trimmer and just cut a little bit off each sides. And then we're using liquid glue. Again, I liked this nozzle. The more I'm using it, I'm getting a little more acclimated with it. If you aren't familiar, it does lay a lot of glue down at once. So you got to kind of understand the glue flow, and once you kind of have that figured out, it's fairly easy to use. So we're using a lot of pressure because this is a lot of paper we're adhering here. I also use a 110-pound card base, so we essentially have like 600 pounds of cardstock here in this card. So she's thick, and sometimes thicker cards struggle in the mail, so just be sure to know that if you're making thick cards, that when we have these ones that are a little thicker, I like to take them to the post office and just go that route in order to get them sent. So I'm deciding how we're going to layer this. I liked this little swag of these florals on each side. And since we already have so much going on in thickness, I decided to glue them straight down. No popping up, although it was really hard not to use foam tape. I tend to be an over adhesor, not only in the amount of adhesive that I use, but in the amount of loft of popping and dimension. I love dimension, and it can get a little crazy sometimes. But we've used a lot of liquid glue, so we're putting a lot of pressure down, and we're just going to make sure that this is set. This has been one of my longer videos, so I hope if you're still here that you're enjoying what you're seeing and that you're interested. Go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe. I'd love to have you on my channel. I do try to post 2 videos weekly. It's been about 1 video just because I've got a day job that sometimes does get in the way. But if you're here, welcome. I'd love it if you stayed, so please subscribe. Now, I know I mentioned that I didn't want to pop up the florals, but it's so hard not to want to pop up the sentiment. But also, I knew a big portion of it was going to be down in that recessed area. So I thought we could get away with it by ensuring that we added a little bit support behind this U. And I'm just taking some extra time to ensure that I have it popped up and straight. And then we're going to go ahead and add a foam strip to the Make Me Smile. and go ahead and put that down. Again, mostly because I knew that recessed image or that recessed space in the middle, and I knew that having it popped up would be best for that. So that's the card. We're going to go ahead and add some bling, and then that'll finish the card today. I typically don't use silver. I'm more someone who reaches for gold, especially in crafting. Not so much in my jewelry or everyday life, but gold for crafting. And I seriously contemplated gold for this one, but I'm really happy with the way that the silver turned out. And adding silver is a little bit outside my box. So I'm also glad that I did that moving forward. But that's the card for today. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. I'm so glad that you're here, and please enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up, and I hope that you have a beautiful day.